The morning of General Harold Beaumont's funeral was cold and gray, the kind of sky that seemed to mourn on its own. Rows of uniformed officers stood at attention outside Arlington's chapel, their medals catching what little light broke through the clouds. Black cars lined the long driveway, and men with earpieces kept a careful perimeter. It was a ceremony for the powerful, attended by the powerful, and everything had been arranged to reflect that. No one noticed the old man until he was already at the gate. He came on foot, which was the first strange thing. He wore a plain brown coat, the kind bought decades ago and never replaced, its collar turned up against the November wind. His shoes were clean but worn thin at the heel. He carried nothing but a single white carnation, pinched between two fingers that trembled slightly. Whether from age or cold, no one could tell. His face was deeply lined, the skin of a man who had spent years under a hard sun, and his eyes, pale blue and quiet, moved toward the chapel doors with a certainty that suggested he had every right to be there. The young soldier at the gate stepped forward before the old man could reach the steps. "Sir, this is a private service. Invitation only." His voice was polite but firm, trained to be immovable. The old man stopped. He looked at the soldier kindly, without irritation, and said simply, "I knew Harold a long time ago." He offered nothing more. No name, no rank, no proof of anything. Just those 7 words and the white carnation and those quiet blue eyes. The soldier exchanged a glance with his colleague. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't let you through without credentials." He gestured toward the road. "There's a public viewing area set up down the hill." The old man looked at the chapel for a long moment. Then he nodded, the way a person nods when they've accepted something much larger than a closed gate, and he turned to walk down the hill. A few of the officers nearby had watched the exchange. Most turned back to their conversations. One colonel muttered something under his breath and almost smiled. Inside the chapel, the eulogies were already beginning. Senators spoke of General Beaumont's strategic brilliance. A former Secretary of Defense described his unmatched courage. A 3-star general recalled the campaigns, the medals, the decades of distinguished service. The words were true and well chosen and entirely incomplete, the way official histories always are. At the back of the room, an aide leaned down and whispered into the ear of General Marcus Webb, 4 stars on his collar, the highest-ranking officer present. The aide's message was brief. Webb's expression did not change at first. Then something shifted behind his eyes, something old and heavy and unfinished, and he stood up quietly in the middle of a eulogy, excused himself past a row of stunned dignitaries, and walked out of the chapel. He found the old man sitting on a bench at the bottom of the hill, the white carnation resting on his knee, his gaze lifted toward the bare trees lining the cemetery path. Webb stopped in front of him. Then, without a word, the 4-star general came to full attention and raised his hand in a slow, deliberate salute. The old man looked up. For a moment he seemed confused. Then his eyes filled and he rose from the bench with difficulty, his old body protesting each inch, until he stood straight and returned the salute with a steadiness that had no business existing in those trembling hands. "Joseph Carver," Webb said, his voice rough. "I have been looking for you for 31 years. The old man, Joseph, lowered his hand slowly. "You weren't supposed to find me," he said. That was the point. Webb sat down beside him on the bench, 4 stars and all, and the story came out in pieces, the way buried things always surface. In the winter of 1972, in a valley that no map acknowledged, a young soldier named Joseph Carver had carried a wounded Harold Beaumont 4 miles through enemy terrain on his back. He had refused evacuation for himself. He had disappeared into a field hospital and then simply vanished from the record, unwilling to accept recognition, unwilling to let a ceremony replace what the silence had already said. Harold had spent years trying to find him. He had told Webb the story so many times it had become the general's most private inheritance, the debt that could not be paid, the name that deserved a salute no one had ever given. Webb reached into his jacket and removed a small folded piece of paper. He left this. Said if you ever came, to give it to you. Joseph opened it slowly. The handwriting was shaky but deliberate. It said only, "I never forgot what you gave up. Neither should you. You are the reason I became who I was." Harold Joseph Carver sat with that note for a long time. Then he placed the white carnation on the bench beside him, stood slowly, and walked back up the hill toward the chapel. The soldier at the gate stepped aside without a word, and the men with medals and titles and rows of ribbons moved quietly to make room for the old man in the worn brown coat, the one who had never asked for anything and had given everything.